Welcome to Moving Iron with Casey Seymour and Greg Peterson, the podcast for anyone and everyone involved and interested in the business of ag equipment. If you want to understand what trends and market forces are impacting the price of your iron, you've come to the right place. Buckle up, it's time to move some iron.
Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast. I've got Greg Machinery Pete Peterson back on here to talk about what's happening in the world of equipment, and also want to thank John Deere for sponsoring this edition of the Moving Iron Podcast. Greg, how you doing today, bud?
I'm doing well, Casey. How are things in your world?
Not too bad. Not too bad. We got a little nice weather coming our way, and planters are running, so it's that time of the year.
Yeah, it's a busy time. I think we're looking finally at a good, warm, dry stretch here in southeast central Minnesota. They're talking next 10 days or so. So lots of work will get done.
That's good. It's good. Everybody's chomping at the bit. Can't wait to get after it. You know, everyone can't wait to do it, and they're mad as hell the whole time they're doing it. So now it's
farming is hey, God bless them. Feeding the world, man. It's quite a deal.
Quite the deal, that's for sure. Well, Greg, we watched a couple auctions go this week. You brought up a pretty good one that I think is a good indicator where we're at in the marketplace. You had a consignment sale up in New York. We saw a 2001 MX240 sale, had about 4,000 hours on it, and it brought 92,000 on it. But the unique thing about it was it lived its whole life under the big blue shed. It looks like it was pretty faded. It's pretty, might be a good opportunity for some Dakota Shine to get put on that.
Yeah,
tractor.
that does. It did need a little Dakota Shine, right? It was mechanically very solid tractor, Casey. Like you said, an 01 MX240. The sale was Saturday, Rochester, New York. It was a consignment sale. It was by Alex Lyon and Son Auction. And they're, by the way, getting a lot more ag equipment. They kind of known specializing on the construction side. They're world's largest privately owned auction company, or family owned auction company.
Really?
Great folks. But yes, $92,000. That's tied for the second highest auction price ever on an MX240. Interestingly, the only higher one was, we talked about it a lot back in 22 at the top of the used market. So there was a sale right after Thanksgiving, November 29th of 22 in Curlew, Iowa, where 99 model MX 240 with 3,180 hours brought 94,000, and that was Osborne Auctions sold that one. So yeah, 92K to me last Saturday, even though it didn't look the prettiest, it just shows you that for that right condition, you know, if farmers aren't buying new, you still got to farm the acres you farm. And if you need maybe that backup horsepower, you want the best used that you can get. And, you know, even at 92,000 at, you know, what's a new one cost at that horsepower range. So
Right.
even though sales of new are kind of soft right now, very soft, good condition used is still doing well, like this one.
Yep. They had when you watch something and they know the story behind it, typically a tractor like that looked the way that one looked, as faded as it looked, and even like the headlights were faded, so it hadn't been out there. It'd been out in the sun quite a bit. But that kind of goes back to that story. So I'd love to go back and see what the story of that tractor was and how they talked about that tractor, and then how they talked about, with it being a consignment sale, the guy selling it, was he a respected person in the community, those kind of things, because typically the way that tractor looked would drive down the value, just because, even if it was in great mechanical shape. So there must be a great story behind that tractor.
One thing that I found in the Northeast, in particular, out in New York and Pennsylvania, it's been interesting, you know, all these years tracking auction prices in different parts of the country. Casey, we're Midwest guy. You're kind of the plains there, Western Nebraska. I'm upper Midwest Minnesota. But out in the Northeast, even on consignment sales, it felt to me like it's more of a almost old school, like 20 years ago, 25 years ago here in the Midwest, where you have a consignment sale and it's just, you know, a tighter group. I struggled to how to explain it. You know, our farms get pretty big out here in the Midwest. In the Northeast, they're chopped up. You know, it's such a population center. So I think when a tractor like that pops up, maybe versus here on a consignment sale, a higher percentage of people know that guy.
Yep.
You know, and that would be what my gut would say. But, you know, I think percentage-wise, you're right. To attain that premium of a price, there had to be multiple interested buyers that knew the history on it. And again, even though it wasn't the prettiest mechanically, you know, and again, it's a 2001 model, so you can wrench on it if you have to and all that stuff. So,
Sure.
Yeah, the pre-def stuff. I did have a couple funny stories on the topic of pre-def, Casey. You'll get a kick out of this. So last week, We saw a couple tractors over 100 years old sold at auction. One was by our friends at Amman Auction. Kurt Amman in Nokomis, Illinois, had an Imperial, let's see, I think it was a 40-70, 1911. And it looked like new. And Kurt's a worldwide expert in this stuff. And he said, Pete, there's only 3 known to exist. And it brought $955,500.
Yep.
And posted on Machinery Pete Facebook. And someone said, those pre-dev tractors, man, they really hold their value. And then a couple days later, up my way in Minnesota, in Annandale, Minnesota, Lundin Auction and Appraisers had a sale. And they had a Minneapolis, I think it was a 3570. Let's see if I get the right number. It was a 3570. Now that one looked like it had been sitting out in the Minnesota sunshine for 80 years, but it brought $125,000.
Yeah.
So that was kind of fun last week.
Yeah. The pre-def tractor. Got to get that out of my mouth this morning. Pre-def tractors. It is impressive to watch those sell, right? And especially not so much even like tier 2 engines and those kind of things, back tier 1 engine, those kind of things. But when you start looking at tier 3 and interim tier 4 engines, those are the ones that really stand out when you watch them sell, because everyone knows that like this is the last generation before it went DEF, and it feels like when you watch those machines sell, it makes a significant impact. So like you watch an old, 30 series Deere or old, case tractor, something like that. You saw like a 7230 or something like that. So you watch those tractors sell, and those are, that's just like that last bastion before everything went sideways, and a lot of people.
Yeah, no question. I mean, if you're sitting on a 08, 09, 10 or 11 low houred, red, green, blue, or orange, I mean, you are sitting on gold.
Yeah.
And, moving iron listeners know that, of course. And it's funny when you look at sale bills or auction listings coming up, you kind of go through, you're scanning because everyone's busy, and you look and you go, whatever you're looking for, I need a tractor. And then you see that, 2010 model. Like a 10 model 8345R or something like that with low hours. And you know what's going to happen. It's going to be very, very, very competitive bidding. And even in a down market like right last year was, and again, this year, a lot of, it's not easy out there. So, but again, you got to farm what you got to farm.
Yeah.
And again, coming through that pandemic, we've talked about it a lot, but the price of news has skyrocketed to such a level that it I think has made that pre-def stuff even more attractive right now, even though times are tough.
Yep. Yeah, that's the price increase associated with the new machines as they came out of COVID. I mean, I think there was something depending on the platform and manufacturers and all those kind of things, but all the manufacturers were kind of locked up with each other. No one wouldn't hire anybody else, but they were. I think I did the analysis on this a while back, but it's somewhere between 40 and 70%, depending on what it was that you were doing. And you start looking at, because I remember having the conversation with a guy back in 2018, 19, hey, 2% now is a real number. And I remember the same conversation with somebody last year going like, 2% now really is a real number, because it's, you start looking at, $500,000 for this and $260,000 for a loader tractor anymore. I mean, it's just, you start looking at some of the stuff coming together, and you put a 2 or 3 or 4% price increase on some of that stuff, and you're looking at anywhere from 10 to 50, 60,000 bucks, depending on what you're starting with, So
yeah,
it's a real number now. And looking at used playing into that, and you and I talked about this a lot, but you kind of echoes what I saw happen back at the dealership after the Great Recession in that 2010 timeframe, where everybody kind of contracted down, and it wasn't because of supply chain issues, but it was just fear of the unknown when it comes to the economy. And that's kind of where we're at right now. There's this fear of the unknown of what the economy looks like. Right. And the manufacturers are contracting, and even more manufacturers are talking about even contracting even further than what they're doing now.
Right.
I think it just opens that door up, as if things pick up and run, and we see some stuff happen here towards the end of the year, that we could see an 18-month run in used equipment. So if I know times are tough now, but if you're looking to do something used equipment wise with a piece of equipment, I don't think you're going to find it cheaper than you're going to find it right now.
Yeah, it is. I've been writing in Farm Journal about that exact topic, Casey. If you're able in 2025, my advice is, call your dealer.
Yeah.
Go and have a talk with them, because that late model stuff on the lot, um, they're still motivated to move it. You can get yourself some good deals. And um, again, what I have to be careful of is just thinking that dealers will be stuck with this stuff for 3, 4, 5 years. And again, we've talked about it, but last year, the 150% increase we saw in 0 to 3-year-old equipment sold at auction. I mean, that was mostly all dealers pushing it out.
Right.
And then, like you said, the manufacturers have crunched in so much on the top end that, it's a good time to be a buyer if you can, and to see these strong used prices. We had another sale, Casey, that caught my eye last week. It was our friends at the Steffes Group. It was an online farm retirement auction. I think it was for Nielsen Farms. It was in Granton, Wisconsin, and late model equipment. Wow. They had we were talking about a grain trailer before we started recording here, but they had a pair of 23 Wilson. One was a DWH 750B tandem axle, 42-foot used 2 seasons, brought $77,000. So that's actually the 6th highest Wilson I've ever seen sold at auction, but pushing 80K. I mean, that's, to me is farmers realizing that the price of a new grain cart's, probably going to keep going up. A couple other items. They had a 22 model J&M LC390C tender, brought $40,500. That's the 7th highest auction price ever in an LC390. And they did set one record on a skid steer, a 23 New Holland C345. Now, it only had 147 hours on it, so 2 years old, but really like new. That brought $67,500. Previous high auction price was $62,000 2 years ago out of Georgia. So, that was quite a sale last week in Wisconsin.
Yeah, they had watch those grain trailers sell this time of the year. It's really hit or miss, because you know what you're going to get, but this one actually hit. So I was trying to figure out how much something like that costs new, and I couldn't find the new one, but that's got to be fairly close to new value on that grain trailer.
Yeah, well, when you were talking about the price increase, it's funny, all these years, I always, 15, 20, 25 years ago, you'd get to having that conversation at an auction or a farm show or something. Man, the price of new. And usually we wind up talking about combines and tractors, but holy smokes, I mean, tillage, grain equipment.
Yeah.
I remember standing at an auction December 3rd down the road from me, half hour, in Dexter, Minnesota. And I posted a YouTube video on it, because everything, it was a lot of pre-def tractors, 7920s, and everything sold high. But it was a grain cart. Okay, he had a Brent 2596 22 model, I think a 22 or 3 on tracks, and it brought 178. And I remember filming it going, my memory is not quite as sharp as it used to be, but I'm like, dang, 178, holy smokes. And that was an all-time record high on a grain cart. But, again, what does it cost new? So right. It's everything's gone up.
Yep. Yeah, everything's gone up, and everything keeps going up. I of all things, I was at the little farm and ranch store there in Scottsbluff, and I bought 2 bags of dog food, and it was $150 to get these 2 bags of dog food.
2 bags of Old Roy cost $150.
They got a new puppy, so I had to feed puppy food, and I got my old dog that still eats regular dog food. And I was sitting there, and the lady's like, "Man, I can't believe it. Dog food costs this much." And I go, "I seem to say that about everything these days. Everything costs a bunch of money."
Now, hey, on this topic, I'd be curious to get your take, Casey. I don't know if you saw this, but the guy, the billionaire dude, not Elon, but Bezos, that owns Amazon. So did you see their play coming out in the pickup world? I forget the name of it, but he's part owner of this group, and they're taking a different tack on this. They're coming out with a pickup that is just like base, just bare bones pickup horsepower. And it's customizable. You as a buyer, you go, okay, well, I want to add this or this, but it comes with like nothing. But the price tag, they come right out front and they say, we're building this for the American Joe who just needs reliable transportation, $25,000. Now, at $25K, you're not going to get the Denali,
Yeah.
No, but for 30 years, I've been covering auctions and talking to farmers, and they'll watch a 40-20 sell. And, they're watching, like we were just yakking about, 2, 4, 5, 8% increase, huge increase on price of new. And people say, Pete, why don't they just build a simpler, an old model? Why don't they just go backwards and give me a nice 40-20 or a nice 44-40 or a nice Magnum 71-20? And then we post that on social, we go nuts. People go, oh, I'd buy 2 of them, blah, blah, blah. Well, there's all kinds of realities with that manufacturing today and the engine and all that stuff, obviously. But here you go. Finally, someone's coming along. No, it's a pickup, but they're going to test it and say, we are going to give you a cheap, low cost, but solid and reliable 25K. Now, it's not the prettiest. So it'll be fascinating to me to see how it sells. And personally, I think it might do pretty well.
Yeah, I just Googled. It's called Slate. Is
Slate.
The name?
Yeah, that's a good name because it that's the color of it. It's kind of a
kind of brown
looking.
Yeah, great color.
It almost looks like Soviet Russia, late 80s or something.
And it's funny that you bring that up. It's like you see with the price of vehicles these days and everything, anything machinery wise, that price is going to open up opportunities for competition.
Absolutely.
And you're going to start seeing more and more stuff like, take Monarch tractors, for example. That's a good example of that. Little small horsepower tractor. I think the biggest one they have is 100 horsepower, if I remember right. But it's the electric tractor. It's the fully autonomous tractor. And it's not like it's new. It's been out for 10 years probably.
Right.
And but it's starting to get more and more traction just because of people are shopping it. And it's a niche thing. You're in the orchard business or something like that.
Right.
In your business, something like that. It's a very niche piece of equipment. But you're seeing more and more people start to look at everything. There's a company out there that resurrected the old International Scout, right? And they've got they're taking
the International Scout.
Yeah, it's called the Scout Company, and
I love it.
They have the old Scout pickup and the old Scout, SUV looking thing, and kind of working your way through that, and they have the resemblance of them. And of course it's electric hybrid combo type deal, but it's a neat looking truck. And I want to say they're selling those depending on how they're spec, I think it's between 40 and 65,000 or something like that.
Okay.
But it's not, again, that's a big number, but in today's world, that's really not that expensive for a vehicle.
Well, that's the opportunity you're talking about. And in fact, on that sale auction we were just talking about in Grandin, Wisconsin, they had a pickup on that sale. It was a 23 GMC Sierra 2500 HD Denali. Again, it was like new. I had 3,102 miles on it, diesel Duramax, but it brought 78K.
Yeah.
2 years old on the auction market. So new, what's that, over 100 or I suppose?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But you're right. That does create opportunity for companies. So that when I read about that Slate, that pickup, I thought, this is, again, for 30 years, this is what people have been asking for. Now, will you get out your checkbook and write that check for 25K? We'll see. But that is one thing with the price of rising so high that, and really that's America, that's capitalism.
Yep.
If you can build something at a different price point and make it pleasing and get the job done, hey, you might have the next Apple computer. Who knows?
Yeah. And that's the thing too. If you look at like a Ford XL or a Chevy L, let's see like a custom,
Mm-hmm.
And looking at a Dodge, I don't even pretend like I know what a Dodge trim levels are because I looked at the Dodge pickup forever, but you start looking at those very base spec machines or trucks and stuff like that, you're still knocking on the door of $40,000.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You're just talking like rubber floor mats and
right.
You can't find one with crank windows anymore. And but that was funny about my son, oldest son was probably 12 years old, and my dad had an old Ford F-150, from the 80s that he beats around in, and we were out in this pasture doing some stuff and the field behind his house, and it was hot, and of course I roll down the window, open up the wing window, and I'm getting, and my son was sitting across the way, and he's like, Dad, I'm hot. I was like, just roll down the window, and he did not know how to do it because he's never been in a crank window before, So I was like, you got to turn that crank, and then you got to open that little triangle on the side there, and
open the triangle.
Yeah, so I had the only way I could describe. I couldn't call it a wing window because he had no idea what the hell I was talking about. But it was funny to watch him go through that because I'm like, oh wow, you're a whole generation that's never been in anything but electric windows. Because now that's
Now,
space.
now, Casey, I hear, brother, but our kids can turn this around on us because right before we started recording, uh, I was, I'm 59 and I'm trying to close out my email and get something. I couldn't find the screen, and I'm like, what the heck? How I can't find this? So I think our kids get back at us there,
Oh,
and they're like, oh man. Uh,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I was laughing talking about my father-in-law, who I love him to death. He's an awesome guy, 84, and he lost his charger on his laptop, and he was like, hey, I need a charger. So we were trying to get him to describe the charger on his laptop. And he's like, it's kind of round. And it's like, I think kids they look at us like, man, you guys are dinosaurs. But
yeah.
yeah, rolling down the window on a pickup, man, those are good memories.
Yeah, that is a good memory for sure. That's probably a good place to stop, Greg. Folks want to reach out to you and get you to come talk to their next event. Easiest way just to go to machinerypete.com and click the link.
Yep, link right on the bottom. Shoot me an email or hit me on Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram. Was out to a sale in Wisconsin last week. Got to visit with a lot of great folks. Always fun to get out on the road.
You going anywhere this coming week to the people might catch you at?
No, Mrs. Pete, she's got me at home for a couple of weeks, so hopefully that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you say, that it's getting busy in the field, and there are a ton of auctions. I gotta say, it's very, very busy here right through April into May. So I'll be busy watching those. Our friends at Sullivan Auctioneers, as we're recording this, they have a sale today with some very late model equipment from Van Wall Equipment out of Iowa selling.
Yeah.
Sprayers. They got a couple 24 model, like a Ford 10R and a Fendt 9370H, late model tractor. So I'll be tracking that, but keep them busy.
Right on. Greg, appreciate you being on. We'll catch you again next week.
Sounds great, Casey. Have a good week.
Stay tuned for more Moving Iron podcasts after these messages.
Looking for more accuracy, more productivity from your current planter? Let's get exact with precision upgrades from John Deere. Start with Exact Emerge and get accurate singulation and spacing at 10 miles per hour. Or choose Exact Shot to promote early root growth and cut fertilizer costs. And with Furrow Vision, save time by verifying seed depth right from your cab. Visit johndeere.com/planner upgrades and see why nothing runs like a Deere.
Welcome back to Moving Iron Podcast. I got Chip Nellinger here from Blue Roof Ag Marketing on to talk about what's happening in the world of commodities. Chip, how you doing this morning?
Good. How you doing, Casey?
Doing pretty good, man. Just figuring our way through all this stuff. We have on again, off again trade talks, and we weren't going to talk to China. And well, China got kind of blown off here the first part of the week, and now we're meeting this weekend. That was only a 24-hour turnaround on that one. But then you've got you look at some of the stuff happening in the wheat market right now. There's some lesser than expected yields coming out of the wheat belt, and it could start swinging the price of wheat. So I guess as you're looking at the wheat market right now, what are you looking at, Chip?
Yeah, crop conditions improved 2%. We've had some recent rains that at least from the beauty contest of the crop condition report was beneficial. But you also, maybe have some concern that some of those rains were a little bit excessive and hitting the wheat crop maybe at a time that, heavy rain like that is actually detrimental instead of beneficial. So, I think it remains to be seen how that's going to affect final yields. We've got, a ways to go before we figure that out. But at least visually, crop condition-wise, things have improved the last couple of weeks after these rains. Whether that's actually translating to better yield or not, I think is still a question at this point, and will be for quite a while until the combines really get through this thing here over the next several weeks.
Yep. When you're looking at the corn market right now, you see a lot of news coming out. Obviously there's been lots of rain in areas that are pretty dry. There's been planting progress has been going the way it's been going. Been really tackled for the most part by tariff talks, what we see there. But just like you've talked about several times on here, you're on again one week, you're off again the next, and somewhere in the middle you're going to find that rally point. Feels like after I've read 15 articles this morning about Mexico's going to start doing some trade deal with the United States. Japan's doing something. South Korea's doing something. China's coming back to the table. So all these trade deals are starting to be at least warming back up again. Now it takes one tweet to blow them out of the water, but I guess as you're looking at this corn market, all the pressures around tariffs right now, all the pressures around what's going on with trade. So I guess as you're looking at it, how are you advising your customers what to be doing right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of moving gears in this machine right now. We've had a recent sell-off in corn, kind of along with the wheat market down into new lows. The corn market has dipped a little bit here. I think there's two things that work in corn. Number one, this time of year, as the crop gets planted, it's always hard to, kind of kill the crop, so to speak, during this time. I think one thing, the perception by the market of the weather is that it's good. We're going to get this crop planted. Now, if you take a line from about St. Louis to about Fort Wayne, Indiana, and you're a producer and you're south and east of that line, you're scratching your head right now saying, the market's selling off hard on all this great weather and the crop getting planted. And there's literally areas, in south and east of that line that haven't turned a wheel yet. And muddy. I don't know if you saw the Kentucky Derby this past Saturday. Absolute slop. That is not a small area that are receiving rains like that. Now, they're going to dry out, but the point is, it is less than perfect there. You get north and west of there, and yes, it's been perfect planting conditions, but that's because they're coming in very, very dry. They've received some rains. Planting conditions are really good, but they have no subsoil moisture if you look at the drought map. So that's going to be what the key factor is as you go forward into summer, is whether that Western Corn Belt can keep getting rain. Now, no one's talking about the fact they're going to have to mud a bunch of acres in the southeast, and it better not turn off hot and dry there, or they've got a real problem. So those questions are still ahead of us. And I think from the trade standpoint, that's the other thing. It seems like for 3 weeks now, we get, the Secretary of Ag, the President, the Commerce Secretary, the Treasury Secretary on Fox News and all these news outlets, and quoting, we got these trade deals. We got 100 countries coming to us wanting trade deals, and it gets the market excited, and they're ready for an announcement, and there's no announcement. And I think that has disappointed. Now, understandably so, because, these complex negotiations, it doesn't happen in 48 hours where you just, meet and have a trade deal. So it takes some time. But the perception of some of the comments from these government officials, I think, has been a disservice to the market, because it gets the market excited about all this trade news that's going to come out, and then nothing comes out. It's like, that cartoon where, you're going to shoot this gun, and, the little flag comes out in a puff of smoke, and it's, a non-event. And so I think that, on top of the perception of the weather being, quote unquote, perfect for planting right now, has caused a sell-off. But we've got a lot of questions out there. You mentioned here just overnight, or, late yesterday, we saw some news that we're going to now have a meeting with China. And, overnight, beans rallied double digits off of that news. Stock market's up. So there, again, will something come of that? Will it even happen? It leaves the market vulnerable to some disappointment. But the good news is, it looks like we are pushing the needle in the right direction here, and that eventually we're going to start getting some trade deals. Now, whether that includes any boost for ag products to these countries is another story that the market's going to have to deal with. At the end of the day, I think it still falls back to weather, and that's out ahead of us in the June-July timeframe for corn, in the August timeframe for beans. And we got a lot of weather and production uncertainty ahead of us, and a lot of this trade and tariff talk to kind of throw a monkey wrench in things in the short run here.
Yep. So I always bring something else up. This time of the year, you get planting progress. I don't know if the market just needs something to bet on when they're out there, but I watched this planting progress report, and oh my God, the world's coming in, we're not going to crop planted, and we're off 25% of where we should be this time of year. And by the weekend, they're plus 25% of where they should be for the year, right? So, with planter technology and planter speeds and the size of planters and so on and so forth, you can get a lot done real quick and get the right thing. So I guess I look at the planting progress report, to me, as a a very, I guess, antiquated tool anymore. Maybe 20 years ago, when you could only go 4 miles an hour and everybody had an 8-row planter, and that was kind of what your 8 and 12-row planters were kind of the jam, where was kind of what was going to drive the marketplace. But today, when you have 60-foot planters out there going between 8 and 10 miles an hour, you can plant a lot of stuff real quick. So I guess as you look at the planting progress report, when you're talking to your guys, how much credence do you put in that report, and where do you draw the line with that?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. That it's a little bit of a moot point. And to your point earlier, I do think that some of it is just news that feeds the market, right? Whether it's planting progress, and then we have crop conditions once the crop gets planted. It sometimes it's just noise. And the last few years, other than what was it, 2018 or 2019, when we had like epic biblical historic flooding, right? And that's a 1 in 100 time. You're right. We can just plant the crop, and I think it says why. I talked earlier about that line from St. Louis to Fort Wayne and how wet it is south and east of there. And the market knows it's going to get planted. But I think as you sit back, what it doesn't ever account for is how much needs replanted. There's going to be some of that out there. So as we talk to producers, it helps give us a feel for, all right, if you're sitting outside of Des Moines, Iowa, and you've had the first or second fastest planting pace ever, conditions are absolutely perfect, it's likely because it's dry. So let's keep an eye on that. How much rainfall are they going to get going forward? We know going into it, there's very little subsoil moisture in that northwestern corn belt. In the southeast, as you talk to producers there, it's like, all right, let's talk about, all right, maybe you had a third of your crop planted. How much of that needs replanted? When did you finish up planting, right? Because once it gets planted, the market's like, oh, shoo, we got it planted here and record crop coming. But we know that planting dates and conditions matter. So did they mud that in?
Right.
And then a month later, did it turn off hot and dry? Did they have stand issues, as that came up? So that helps us kind of maybe get a better feel for if we do see some hotter, drier weather this summer, how's that going to affect the crop? And that is what the market has a hard time figuring out, is once it gets planted and from planting to a grain fill and harvest, the market has a hard time figuring out what happens and what the effects of moisture, dryness, the conditions that we get from Mother Nature, how that's going to affect yields. And sometimes that's where, farmers and advisors, agronomists that are working with them can kind of get a leg up and get some inside information on what's really going out in the field, because the market doesn't see that, and they have a hard time discounting what is going on. So to your point, planting progress probably doesn't matter a lot. It's it's just
report. How it got planted report. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. It's just kind of noise that the market, holds its breath and says there's anything here to trade on. And right now it's to the negative side. I think it's been something that is, been negative to the market, but it's looking past like, okay, the acreage that got planted in southern Illinois, southern Indiana, Kentucky, it might have got planted the first time, but it doesn't need replanted. And there's some of that that gets missed in those reports. They don't come out with that on the state reports that oh yeah, we said Illinois is 52% planted, but 21% of it in southern Illinois needs replanted, or that type of situation. So that always slips through the cracks, and it matters longer term, but it's hard for the market to get its arms around that information.
Yep. Let's talk a little bit about let's talk a little bit about let me get the right spot here before I start talking. All right. All right, oil. I want to talk a little about oil now, okay? All right. Let's talk a little bit about the energy sector right now. As you're looking at what's going on with oil has, if you look at the WTI oil, you're at right about $60. For the last 2 years, it's like this fluctuated around in bands, $10 bands between 55 to 65, 65 to 75, kind of just bounce around in there. As you look at what's going on now, obviously world supply, there's plenty of supply, and that would be an indicator that, the economy has some weak points in it. But as you're looking at, right now obviously there's a lot of input stuff being shuffled around right now. A lot of folks are looking at contracts and those kind of things. I guess as you're looking at oil, how are you thinking about your customers? And when you're looking at like diesel and fertilizer and those kind of things, obviously those kind of things have already been purchased. But as you start looking down the road here, it just feels like those two, oil just can't. It feels like the world's happy with oil at $75, between 65 and $60 a barrel.
Yeah, I think there's some interesting things happening in the energy markets. One of the Trump administration's main goals was to get energy prices down and have the U.S. become self-sufficient on energy. Like the last time Trump was president, we started exporting oil for the first time ever and was totally self-sufficient. That seems to be happening. However, it's because OPEC and OPEC Plus continues to, pump this thing and not, crank back production. And that's pushed us under $60 for a period of time. And unfortunately, that probably happened too quickly for our domestic fracking to make any money. And it might keep them offline longer. So I'm not sure in the short run what's happening here. Maybe there was some back channel agreements between the Trump administration and OPEC that, hey, let's get some energy prices down to help alleviate some of this immediate inflation pressure that we're having. And maybe down the road, OPEC dials back a little bit, allows U.S. producers to increase a little bit. That's one possibility that happened. The other possibility is they're going to keep the pressure on. OPEC's going to keep the pressure on and kind of punish us a little bit. And that might be, the real answer to this thing. Whatever it is. Also, you got a third possibility that the world economy and maybe the U.S. economy is starting to slow a little bit, especially with some of the tariff stuff going on. And so maybe it's a combination of some or all of that. But for whatever the reason, we've dipped under $60. It has certainly helped ease inflation. But I don't know if that's a long-term friendly thing for the U.S. Oil industry. Now, just yesterday, you still have this situation going on between Israel and the Houthis and Iran. Is Iran going to get drug into this with direct, hostilities at Iran? Is the U.S. going to be part of this or help, kind of calm that down? And that got crude oil rallying a little bit. So you're always subject to waking up some morning and looking at the commodity markets and seeing, what happened to crude oil? Something flaring up in the Middle East to do that. And certainly a situation with Iran, escalation with Iran would do that. But at the end of the day, we're still trading right at $60. I think it's yet to be seen is that maybe, the albatross flying that the world economy is starting to slow down. It has pressured ethanol margins a little bit, slowed that down just a tick, I would say. But from a producer standpoint, I think it does make sense to maybe look at locking some fuel in. It's kind of a gift at this point. I'd maybe go out if you haven't done so, maybe get stuff locked in through at least the end of spring, maybe the first part of fall, and take advantage of these lower prices while we see them.
Right on. All right, good stuff as usual. Chip, folks want to reach out to you, get more information about what you're doing over at Blue Reef Agri-Marketing. What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, just give us a call at our main office in Morton, Illinois. It's 309-550-7213. We'd love to chat with you.
Right on. Chip, appreciate you being on the podcast. We'll catch you again next time.
All right. Thanks, Casey.
Stay tuned for more Moving Iron podcast after these messages.
Well, there they are, mocking you.
See you next year, loser.
That weedy area that's got you thinking, man, I hate that spot. Wish I'd sprayed better. Get the last laugh with a sprayer upgrade from John Deere. Precision upgrades that can increase your sprayer's performance, like ExactApply, advanced nozzles to give you more control at more speeds. It's just one of the many precision upgrades you'll find at johndeere.com. Now, let's see who's laughing.
Hello, welcome back to Moving Iron Podcast. Got Aaron Fennell back on here to talk about what's happening in the equipment business. Aaron, how you doing, bud?
Very well. Yourself?
finer than frog hair. Can't
There
complain
it
at all.
is.
Yeah. Can't complain at all. It's been it's springtime now. We got planters out running around, doing all the fun stuff planters do this time of the year, and we see, at least in our neck of the woods, we don't really have any hiccups. There's no weather hiccups other than it might be too windy, which
Too dry.
and dry. The way the wind's been blowing, I wouldn't surprise me if it blew the corn out of the ground.
It definitely helps the residue managers on a pass by pass basis.
You live in a windy place when all the corn stalks are drifted along the fence line, just like snow.
I actually, in my lot,
Andrew.
just so you know how windy and how sandy it is here, in all these years, I've never had drifts till now. Drifts of sand
Andrew.
that I have not scooped away with a shovel, but with a skid loader.
Yep.
Wow.
Andrew.
Yeah, there's one field I go hunt when I go pheasant hunting. That's when it does drift up, the snow drifts up, you can walk over the fence on the
Right.
drift, right? And I drove by there the other day, and it was between the sand and the corn stalks. I feel like you could have made it over the fence.
I was just gonna say you probably walk over it still.
So it was we're really dry out here. The eastern corn belt's getting a lot of rain, so that's what you're seeing affect the corn price right now. But and another thing too, it drives me crazy about some of these guys that that set the price of corn. And they get so ginned up on planter progress, right?
Oh,
It could be 0% today, and by the end of the weekend, it's 56%.
75.
Because you can go 10 miles an hour,
Right.
100 feet at a whack and be done. You know what I mean? It's this. I wish they would just take that out because it has zero outcome on what the actual if the corn's going to get planted or not.
No, you're exactly right. In fact, it is a 50% whack on a
Yeah.
good week of running.
Yeah.
Easy. I've seen that on, excuse me, I believe on Ag Day they show that planter
Yeah.
progress, week by week, and I am not kidding you. I think it was it 19? I know 19 was wet here. Was it wet everywhere? Because that would have been after the flood. We had the blizzard, they had the flood. And I
Yeah,
think
it was
the
19.
rest of the Corn Belt was pretty
Yeah.
wet. It was. That was a real wet year. And I
And-
remember it went from 20 to 72 in 1 week.
Yeah.
Andrew.
And everybody's like, well, I guess there's no reason to panic. Yeah. Hey,
Yeah.
everybody, do you remember for 5 years, the planting window?
Right.
When I have 500 acres. I'm supposed to have a 24 row, I guess, for this planting window.
Right. Yeah.
Well, we only farm 1,500 acres. I guess we should have 3.
Yeah.
And then that became everybody trade planters in 13 and 14. And we all know what they're worth. But just to jog everybody's memory, the planting progress means nothing because the planting window was so overly, personal opinion, touted by these seed companies 20 years ago. Everybody's got twice as big a planter as they actually need. So we
And-
get planted in no time.
Yeah, there's the planting window now you still have the planting window, and I do think there is a yield correlation to that, obviously. But
Oh, there is 100%, but it's not 3 minutes.
no, but now the planting window is long enough now to where you can actually plant it and then have time to stare out the window and enjoy the view, right?
Right.
If you watch this, like you talked about, I've watched many a weekend on U.S. Farm Report and Ag Day, and plenty of articles where, oh my God, we're in such bad shape. We're 20 points behind where we should be on planting
Right.
progress. And I'm like, just give it till Monday.
Andrew.
It'll be 70+%, and we'll be plus 20%, plus 20 points. And next thing you know, here it is. Planter technology today
Andrew.
changes the way people farm and the ability for them to get that crop in the ground, whether you're talking cedars or you're talking planters, right?
Right.
You got that technology and the speed of which you can go, and the sheer size. Even if you just went 4 miles an hour with some of this, like a DB 120 or whatever, like you're covering a lot of ground really quick.
60
What's up,
feet is the average planter.
Right. And you go do that at 8 miles an hour, 10
Yeah.
miles an hour.
Andrew.
And if you're one guy that I know, you do it at 12 miles an hour, and
Because you can.
Yeah.
It'll do it. Look, it says right there, 98%. Hell, we're all right.
We're good. We're good.
Bump it up another.
Yeah. So it's planer technology is making that planer window. It gives you more room for error as you start looking at weather and those kind of things that start pulling through, because in a fair few amount of days, 2, 3, 4 days, you see them right back on track. So please stop with the planer progress stuff out there, folks. Okay. It doesn't matter anymore. Okay. All right.
It takes longer to fill the thing and get it set than it does to plant.
I know. So just chill on the planer progress. Doesn't matter anymore. All right. All right.
And
Today I want to spend a little time. I brought this up last week where I was talking to Greg on the podcast, but I want to spend a little more time on it because I think it's important for people to understand how this flow of equipment works. And Aaron and I both have been in the business where we were looking at the migration of trends and the migration of equipment. And I want to spend a little time talking about that. So there's two major migrations of equipment and things you see. So typically when you start seeing trend lines develop, they kind of start in the heart of the Corn Belt, and they start working their way east. They start working their way west. And those trend lines are, I think the easiest trend line to point to is tillage practices, right?
Right.
It seems like to me every 5 years there's a brand. Oh my God, this is going to revolutionize the ways we farm, right?
The silver bullet for tillage.
You go from good old fashioned moldboard, conventional rolling dirt, all the way up to the conventional till to no till to minimum till and strip till and all the way down the board. And all of those things have done great things for ag, and they've done amazing things for yield and those kind of things. But you watch how like vertical tillage was a big deal, right? Mm-hmm. And you some people are still using vertical tillage and those kind of things. But as you watch these kind of transitional lines take place, they typically start in the center of the Corn Belt. They work their way to the Western Corn Belt all the way to the Atlantic Ocean and kind of up and down, depending on where you're at and what you're doing.
Right.
Same thing happens with technology, spec technology, not technology like AutoGuide and those kind of things, but I'm talking like the specs that are inside of a specific machine. You'll see that ideas take hold in one area and then it'll kind of slowly burn.
Like the precision aspects, not company, right. Precision aspects of a planter,
right,
are in an ice state,
right.
Then they migrate,
right. And I think the easy one to point to was, remember when powerful bins on combines came out?
Yes,
that was the one where everyone's like, no one needs powerful bins. That's dumb. You get up there and I'll take them down like I've taken them down for the llast 60 years.
I can climb up there a lot for $15,000.
And now you can't hardly. I mean, if you look at any combine out there right now, the idea, the machines that have non-powerful bins compared to the machines that do have powerful, it's almost like, why don't you have powerful bins on this? What's the problem here? Right. What part of the memo did you not get when you start looking at that? And I think that was one that started. It started out in areas of Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee,
Iowa to Ohio.
Lots of trees, lots of bridges. And the idea of like going down the road and just hitting the powerful bends as you're coming down and then popping them back up or whatever you need to do, or just fold them down as you go down the road. The idea of having to get out, fold down everything, come back down, and then hope for the best as you went through there. That really changed the way people look at the specs in those combines. But it didn't start in Western Nebraska.
No. It was flabbergasting to us why it was such a big deal.
Why? What the tree? I'd never seen one before.
It actually holds less.
That's right.
The manual fold bin holds like 25, 50 bushel more. And that was more important to us than who folds it every trip. Be like, we got trees. We got trees everywhere. I'm like, you know who doesn't have trees? The steel company.
That's right. That's right. But the idea of how that has now become a staple on a combine now.
Oh, if it ought.
Yeah.
The fact it's not standard across the board on every color is a little bit flabbergasting.
It's almost like it's like power windows on a car, right?
Right.
Like you can't. I don't care. I don't think you can go to GM or Ford and say, "Hey, listen, I want crank windows."
You can't GM, but you can Ford.
But but they give the people what they want. That's the thing there, Aaron.
Yeah,
But they have that the idea of having that a crank window in a car. Somebody would be like, "It's so hot, I'd like to roll down the window, but I don't know how." You know what I mean? It's like,
what is this?
Yeah, that idea of not having powerful bins on a combine now is just, it's just not something that you see. Now we're getting to the point now where you have powerful combines and tips on the top to make it even bigger to hold what you have now. So that's to be another thing. So
go ahead, Casey.
I was gonna say, we start looking at trend lines as they develop on machines. It's not, I think some people get confused with, oh, the technology. It's the specs that are inside the machine that really drive the holistic picture of how that machine, from an efficiency standpoint and a technology standpoint, kind of lay that groundwork. Automation, all those kind of things that are coming are all part of a bigger spec window, I guess, if you will, portfolio, that are leading up to a bigger picture kind of idea when you look at machine.
Right. Just like another market segment, if you will, that follows I-States and out planter attachments.
Yeah.
Every single year there's 15 new ones, and some guy in some town in Illinois that's got this agronomy business, and we found these and this is going to fix everybody's problems. That is a big one.
Yeah.
Very big one that migrates. One thing, as we're sitting here talking, that it's not necessarily the machine that's in migration, but it's the, back to the, and not specs, but back to practices. One thing that hasn't been so, it is I-State driven, but it's not the end all be all like so much else, is strip till.
Right.
And the reason for that is one of the major manufacturers is just down the road out in this country.
Yeah.
To the point 25 years ago, it was called a one tripper because it was. You made one trip. That was tied to your planter and you went out there and that's what you did. And then somebody else makes one. Well, how do you tie that to a planter? Well, you don't. You do it in two passes because it's better. Everybody hits the brakes. Nothing's tied together anymore. To the point, two different strip till companies in the High Plains both had them attached, Orthman and Schlegel.
Yep.
And the amount of machines, and oddly enough, where in the lower 48 is the planter tied to the strip till still a thing? The Southeast.
Yep.
Nothing in common other than that practice, not even saying planters, row spacing, none of that, but that same practice 2,000 miles away.
Right.
And in the I-State, never ever tied together, doesn't work. Why would you do that? It's there's that, and it can be, Nebraska's, our state's a great example. It's two completely different states.
Right.
Illinois gets some of that north to south, like we do east to west.
Yep.
Northern Illinois is cold Wisconsin, and climate more. And then you get southern Illinois, that's Kentucky.
Right.
So everything start folding corn heads.
Yeah.
Right. We have out here in the High Plains, we've been running 16 row 30s, 40-foot headers forever.
Yep.
Why would you ever need that? We don't even use header trailers.
No.
Yep. And then, oh God, these guys made a folding 12 row. Ooh, they even make a folding 8 row.
Yep.
And now to the point, you get calls from east to here. Do you have any folding heads? Do you have any folding heads? And we've even got a couple guys adopting it.
Yep.
Because it's there.
you're starting to look at the because that's one thing too is depending on what your farming operation looks like and where your fields are and what your movement of machinery looks like and how much
Logistics.
Little logistics involved in that. Yep, it's not uncommon. Like you leave south on Scottsbluff Highway, Highway 71. It's a 4-lane highway, and here's a combine rolling down the road. It's got a head on it, 45-foot, 50-foot head. It scoots over and lets everybody around it, and those kind of things. But the idea of that folding up is, again, it's significantly more expensive to get the folding corn head than it is to just get the rigid one, right? But if you've got everything folded up, again, now you're more efficient. You're going down the road. You have to worry about anything. You have to worry about, here comes a bridge. Let me turn the lateral tilt to the right here so I can get it over the bridge and over the mailbox and everything else, as things are going down the highway.
Yep.
You just run into, it's just the efficiencies that you run into now. You talked about the Southeast, and that's a place where the planting window and the harvest window it's just there, right? There's no real window to speak of because they can take their time to plant, take their time to harvest.
The only caveat to that would be taking their time to harvest with hurricane season in the fall.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you got to worry about all the stuff that's out, that the weather patterns that come, but the spec trend line, I think, is
Why is
cool
Dad
thing.
nervous? Because there's a low over Bermuda.
That's
Be
right.
like, huh?
Yeah.
Get them spindles on the picker ready now.
So with the specs trend lines that we see coming and how they're moving around, that also encourages the flow of equipment, right? So where equipment gets spec'd and the way it moves around. The biggest current, I guess, for lack of a better term, that really gens the whole kind of ecosystem of farm equipment in North America is the movement of equipment coming out of the north to the south. Southern equipment typically is very low spec stuff, right? It's not
owner operator,
not an owner operator thing. There's not a lot of owner operator stuff down there. So we're talking some more base spec stuff that you see. You see a lot of straight standard front ends and not necessarily suspended front ends, those kind of things. You
straight
see
front axle, power shift, no leather seat, base air conditioner, and a radio.
Yep. And a radio, and it's just the basic of basics.
Thank God they can't take the windows out of the cab like they could on a sound guard.
Yeah, but as you watch the stuff move, what you see happen is the equipment in the south gets put into the north, and the north that usually goes into a couple different things. One is it's a smaller operation where they're upgrading their tractor, and they're getting less hours for less amount of money, right? Because of what it is. They're also seeing a lot of those machines that go into a dairy or a feedlot operation on mixers and grinders and other type of stuff where they can put them into more of a more less desirable situation, and it's not the most expensive tractor on the farm, right? They can put them out there, and they're going to go they get them out of the south with 1,000 hours on them or something like that. They're going to go put 5 or 6 or 8,000 hours on these machines in the next 3 years and put them there. The stuff coming out of the north is the higher spec stuff that makes its way down to that owner operator that's down that area. Also, the bigger operations that you're seeing some of the stuff come out, and they're looking at the suspended front axles and the suspended cabs, and they've got the nice technology in them, and they've got the good air conditioning. They got the heated floor seats because God, if it gets below 40 degrees in the south, everyone's going crazy, and all these things that are there. And so the weight packages and all those different things that they can get for a significant discount compared to buying it new from their local dealer.
Right. That's exactly right. The owner operator will grab the Northern tractor for a low hour late model for what the new stripped down rig will be.
Right. Exactly.
On the fleet farm, no interest.
Yeah.
They're rolling. But for the owner operator, that's a big thing. Yep. If he has an operation where a combine is very important, which isn't a big thing in the Southeast, given all the diversity, peanuts, cotton, sweet potatoes. I mean, they got 17 crops soybeans and what corn they raise is what they do with a combine down there.
Yeah.
Certain kinds of wheat, but that's it. The combine is a very big thing where if it is on a southeastern farm, it came from Midwest High Plains.
Yeah.
Because as stripped down as a tractor is in the southeast, the combine is whoa.
Yeah.
Except four-wheel drive.
Yeah. Depending on where you're at in the southeast, if you're Delta Southeast, you're looking at rice combines.
Right. I'm not talking Delta. I'm
Right.
talking, Georgia, Carolinas.
The one thing about
rice is its own filthy animal.
the thing about rice combine too, granted, when they get used in a very harsh environment. But you talk about something from a wear part type of thing and how it's reinforced. I mean, that's stainless steel on the inside of that machine.
Right.
In a lot of places where we're looking at just, regular tin and those kind of things inside of so stuff. So from a wear perspective, that machine's designed to be wear. Now, I'm not saying that you need to go out and buy yourself a 5-year-old combine that's only been in rice and then go take it to your wheat farm. But I'm saying if you could find that 1-year-old rice combine that's had a season in rice, it's going to have some issues that you have to work through and those kind of things, just like every other combine does. But taking that machine and putting it in a rice or a wheat situation, I don't think you'd ever wear it out. I think it would be the small grain side of it, just in that environment, would change a lot of things.
Exactly. Which, to the guy that you just suggested doing that to, it would also be a good thing that it doesn't wear out, because when it does, the dealer's not going to trade for the old rice combine in Kansas.
That's the thing. That's the thing about those kind of machines, is that they have that. It's like
they might as well have a big red X on the side.
Well, it's like like when I worked in Kansas, there was Amish population, so there'd be a lot of tractors that were the same like tractor on a farm someplace else might have 3,000 or 4,000 hours. These have got 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 hours on them because they're using them as everyday drivers, right? So you still have 8,000, 9,000 hours on a cabless 6420, right? But it's one of those.
Beats driving that buggy to town.
It really does, and it's got but that idea of that machine, two things. One, it's a cabless 6420, right? So what do you do with that in central Kansas? And then it's got 9,000 hours on it. What do you do with that type of thing?
There's only so many sheep farms in the world to buy things like that.
That's right. That's right. But it's one of those things where you have that kind of that yin and the yang, right?
Right.
It's a great idea to take that rice combine and put it in a wheat scenario, small grain scenario. But you're going to have to take it back down to Mississippi to find someone to buy it.
Just put it on an auction.
And, sure. Yeah. Just put it on an auction. There you go.
And you are right, Casey. Those things are bulletproof inside. You could, if you're in the high plains doing dry land wheat or something, that combine's going to last forever.
Right.
So back to your point again, the guy who would do that, he's not a 1 or 2 roll it every year guy anyway. So for that guy who's a keeper, he's a 10-year keeper.
Yep.
That's a no-brainer.
Yep.
Go get that runner. It won't need a thing. Throw it on an auction.
And that's the backside pressure that you're going to feel on that machine. If you do that, is that you're going to have to, if you're in the central United States, you're going to have to put it in an auction, because everyone's going to be like, I don't want a rice machine. Well, it's only been in rice one season, so it's not like it's it's
but it's configured different.
Right.
That's where you run into problems. It's not a corn machine at all.
Right. It's just a small grain machine.
Right. It's not the fact that it's a rice combine why it's problematic. It's because it has a different rotor altogether.
Right. It's all small.
It'll pick corn, but not very good.
Right. Yep. So it really changes the way that you look at it. But that's something to think about if you're looking at that. Again, I would call that a very unconventional way to look at your combines. But if you're one of those guys like you talked about, if you're one of those long-term roll guide, like your 7 year, keeping your combine for 7 years, you're keeping the combine for 10 years or even 5 years for that matter, before you do something with it. That'll be an option.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what's kind of an interesting segment that flows backwards? Choppers.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Choppers are sold new High Plains feedlots, dairies here west, and a lot. Very rarely do I sell a used chopper that don't go east.
Yep. Yeah, you look at,
and that's our, and this is not throwing shade on any state, or I don't need, to hear about Illinois cattle production, but your average feedlot in Illinois versus your average feedlot in Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas is vastly different.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I forgot Colorado, for God's sake.
Yeah.
Vastly different. So the 9,700 Deere, the 970 Jaguar worked its butt off for a year here, and it was one of 4. And now that goes to Illinois, Indiana, and we got the biggest chopper in the neighborhood, and we do all the neighbors,
Right.
And it was one of 4 here.
Yep. You get to the southeast, it feels there's obviously feedlots, there's obviously dairies down there, those kind of things. It's a lot more pocketed, right?
Right.
And it's a lot more. It's not as widespread like Panhandle, Nebraska. There's feedlots everywhere, right? You get up into West Texas and the Oklahoma Panhandle. There's feedlots and dairies everywhere. You get out of New Mexico. There's lots of feedlots and dairies everywhere. So you start, as these things are kind of pocketed into place, you start looking at how that flow goes. And you're exactly right when you're looking at how harvesting equipment makes its way from the north to the south. It's a lot different than the tractor situation when you start looking at what those look. So, yeah, for sure. I think the last thing I want to talk about here is, as we look at this, the only machine out there that I think is immune to the flow of equipment is loader tractors, right? I think when you look at loader tractors, whether you're talking about 125 horsepower or a 200 horsepower loader tractor, those machines in between are very agnostic as to where they go, right? Doesn't really matter how they're spec'd or where they're spec'd. It seems like the spec on a loader tractor is, for the most part, pretty much the same across the board, right? I mean, there's not like a northern spec loader tractor and a southern spec loader. I mean, they're all kind of about the same, right? And the reason for that is they come off of a ranch someplace, right? Or they come off of a road, a state contract or something like that, and they're pretty evenly put. And I would even say this: the driving spec for the entire loader tractor market is the mowing tractor contract that you see out there. Those yearly contracts, because there's so many, and they fairly get kind of spec'd about the same way across the board.
Right. They make it so you have to make them part of your driver of the loader segment. Otherwise, what do I do with my hands? Right. That's where we're at.
Yeah.
The only thing I would say on the loader tractor segment is north of the Mason-Dixon, you have 150 to 200 as your most common loader tractor.
Mm-hmm.
South of Mason-Dixon, it's 100 to 150. They're more apt to run a lot more smaller loader tractors down there. Grapples are very rare down there. They do about everything with spears. The reason being, Casey, they don't put up 5x6 round bales. They put up 6x4 or 5x5, so they don't need that big a tractor to handle the bales like we do. The other thing is, as far as the migration segment, you can see those southern loader tractors go north because I don't need IVT TLS in a grapple. I'm an acreage guy. I need a small 6 with a loader and bucket.
Right.
Well, these guys got 30 of them.
Right.
And conversely, the big 6, small 7, that's a loader tractor in the High Plains, Midwest, is a dual threat in the South.
Yeah. Yep.
It's a loader tractor for the winter or, whatever, summer hay, and they might plant with it.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, that's a, I've
Or
seen
use it in the field for some crop purpose. But
well, I've seen a lot of guys down there with 175 horsepower tractors, 150 horsepower tractors on an 8 to 12 row planter. You know what I mean?
right.
And you see that's not uncommon. So, but the migration of equipment is really important to pay attention to. When you watch how the economy shifts and trades around and those kind of things, paying attention to what that looks like makes a big difference in what you see in the overall price of equipment. When it's like anything else, man, when one isn't doing what the other one's supposed to do, I've seen a lot of stuff where the amount of tractors coming into the South is a lot greater than the amount of equipment coming out of the South. And we talk to our guys in the South, and they're like, we have more tractors on our market now than we've ever seen. Or, hey, man, we need some more tractors because the amount of equipment coming out of the South is greater than what's coming out of the North. And we're like, how many do you want? They're like, we take one. Like, how about 10? How about start with 10? Go backwards.
Right.
And I think so. It's that ecosystem. When it's going like it's supposed to, it's great. But when you start seeing things kind of chip away, when cotton pickers, the CP cotton picker came out, that really jacked up the market in the South because there were so many tractors out there they didn't need anymore. It's worked its way out now, but that was a big. How many conversations did we have with guys in 15, 16, 17 when those machines came out? Like, we got tractors coming out of our ears.
I got 30 of these 180 horse module builders. Now what?
Right. That's right. Yeah. So now that's taking care of itself.
Speaking of that, cotton and migration. When old King Cotton puts his head down way, way, way low,
and
they switch to corn. They buy planters up here because their planters are 38 for the peanuts and cotton and whatever. They buy planters up here. They buy a corn head up here.
Right.
Seen it happen every time price of cotton dips. Tennessee South comes up here, buys corn machines for corn. So there's a big migration piece in itself.
And you're probably going to start seeing that now because
you don't see that out of Texas, out of the western portion of cotton, because they're already geared up for corn on the farm.
Cotton's a different part of the world, right?
Whatever.
Yeah, stripper cotton. You got a guy that plants 4,000 acres of cotton, and he'll have 4,000 acres of corn right next to it.
Right. Right.
The whole thing works together too. So.
Yep.
Watching how that flow works, and again, we're seeing one of those migration periods now where they're not going to plant as many acres of corn or of cotton. I mean, they're going to bring a lot more acres of corn into the mix. So you're going to start seeing some of that migration of equipment out of the north into the south, where you're going to start seeing a lot more of that stuff happen. So, and we're seeing that now. So good time. All right. Probably a good place to stop, Aaron. Folks want to reach out to you, get more information about what you're doing. What's the easiest way to do that?
Call me or text me, 308-760-1193. You can email me, afintel@21equip.com, or I'm on all the social medias.
Right on. You can find me on Facebook, X, Instagram at Moving Iron LLC. You can find me on LinkedIn at Moving Iron Podcast. You can find me on TikTok, Moving Iron Podcast, as well as AgWeb, where you can see the audio version of this, or listen to the audio version of this. And you can also see me on Farm Journal's YouTube channel, and you can see this live version of this as well. If you want to know what Aaron looks like, God bless you. But if you want to know what he looks like, you can go to YouTube, check it out there, and you can see that. And that'll be a good place for you to start. You can also go to movingironllc.com. You can find everything about the Moving Iron Summit coming up here in not Nashville this year. It's in Austin, Texas, September 24th through the 26th. So check it out there. So a lot of good information there. We're working on the agenda, what that's going to look like. We've got a few things locked down, so we'll see more information as that pops up. But so check that out. So with that, I am Casey Seymour with Aaron Fennell, Greg Machinery, Pete Peterson, and Chip Nellinger. Let's go do some iron, folks. Out.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next week. And remember, Moving Iron is available on Farm Journal's YouTube channel and anywhere podcasts are found. So until next time, let's move some iron.